Okay, in this video, we are going to look at whether we should keep or drop product lines. And specifically in this one, we're going to look at product lines that if I drop the product, they affect my other lines, which makes sense. A lot of customers want to go to one place to get their products. So it's likely that if you drop one of your products, that some of your other products could suffer. You think about like construction materials or other things where I don't want to go 5 different places to get my stuff. It's not unlikely that my sales could be hurt by dropping a particular product line. So we're going to obviously compare the relevant costs and relevant revenues and see whether we should keep or drop this product line. So refer to the Hickory Company on the previous page. That's this information here. Relevant fixed costs associated with this line include 80% of Parkett's machine rent and all of Parkett's supervision salaries. In addition, assume that dropping the Parquet product line would reduce sales of the strip line by 10% and the sales of plank line by 5%. All the other information remains the same. So let's just list the alternatives. Actually, I'm just going to do the complementary one. So we're going to get rid of this. I'm only going to do this one here. If the Parquet line is dropped, what is the contribution margin for the strip line? What is it for the plank line? Which alternative, keep or drop, is more cost effective and by how much? Okay, so let's do the easy one first, the keep line. Now remember, even when we're talking about keep, we're only talking about relevant costs, which means I'm not going to include things that are sunk costs and aren't future costs. So for this, for example, that's going to be depreciation. Depreciation is already a sunk cost. It's already going to happen one way or the other. So I'm not going to include that in my calculation at all because it's irrelevant. So rather than starting with the revenues and the variable expenses, I can do that if I want to, but it's easier since it stays the same to come down and just start with my contribution margin. So if I keep all of my lines, my contribution margin is going to be the same as it was before. It's 305,000, and this is all given information. My machine rent is going to be the same as it was before, 75,000, and my supervision is going to be the same as it was before, 45,000. So my total relevant cost is 185 is my total operating income when I take relevant costs, relevant revenues and relevant costs into account. The drop side is a little bit more difficult. So let's go back up here. So what I did here is I created another table to kind of come over here and say, okay, if I drop the Parquet line, what's still going to be there, what's not going to be there, so I could figure out what my total drop is going to be. So first thing, if I drop the Parquet line, I'm going to have 0 contribution margin, which we know because obviously I dropped the line, so I no longer have it. My strip, it says in the problem, is going to, in addition, assume that dropping the Parquet product line would reduce sales of the strip by 10%. If I reduce sales by 10%, by the very definition of variable expenses, the variable expenses would also drop by 10%. So I don't actually have to I could do the math and say, okay, 10%, or 400,000 minus 10%, 225 minus 10%, and then find my contribution margin. But mathematically, it works out the same for me to simply take 175,000 times, and you can either do this times 0.1 and then subtract it from 175, or to skip that step, what I do is I take it times 0.9 because that reduces it by 10%. So my new contribution margin for the strip is 157.5. For the plank, it says that it will reduce my sales by 5%. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take the contribution margin and multiply it by 0.95 to reduce it by 5%. So plank 80% times 0.95, which gives me 76,000. So my total contribution, my new total contribution margin, if I drop the Parquet line, is going to be 233.5. So I can go down here and say 233,500, and I can figure out the differential here. Obviously, those ones aren't done yet, but just for my formulas. Okay, now for kind of probably the more complicated part of this, what do I do with these expenses? Well, I already said depreciation, I'm not going to worry about it at all. So I can just, that's an irrelevant cost because it's sunk cost. So I'm not going to have anything on that line whatsoever. But my machine rent and my supervision, I do need to deal with. So my strip and my plank are going to be exactly the same. My strip and my plank are gonna keep both their supervision and their machine rent as they were, because I'm not dropping those lines. So I could do this and that. Okay, so I've just basically using these same numbers for strip and plank for machine rate and supervision. Now, on my Parquet, here's the part. It's kind of worded a little confusingly, but it says relevant fixed costs associated with the with this line, which is a Parquet line we're talking about. 80% of Parquet's machine rent and all of their supervision salaries. So what that means is that I'm going to keep all the supervision salaries, even if I drop the line, because by the definition of relevant, that means it changes. It would change based on my decision. So those are going to stick around either way. So I'm going to show the change by reducing it by the percentage that it says it's going to drop. So I'm still going to have some that remains, and I'm looking for the overall cost. So for my machine rent, 80% of the machine rent. So I'm going to take the 20% that's still going to be there and add that. So take $50,000 times 0.2, because the 80% is what changed. Okay, so it went away. And then the supervision, it says that all of it stayed. Is that right? Only relevant cost addition, 80% machine rent. I know 80% went away and all of the supervision would go away. That's why the relevant cost. So that one is going to be 0. So now I can find my new segment, or my contribution margin in total. I can also put these numbers down here. So 35,000, 25,000. So if I keep it, I'm going to have my $185,000 worth of operating income. If I drop it, I'm going to drop down to 173.5, which is a difference of $11,500. So in this case, I'm going to want to keep the Parquet line because my operating income goes down by $11,500. And notice, like I said, we got rid of all the costs that don't change based on this decision. So that's it, that video.